Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had explosions but better than bakugos. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in the examination room smelled of antiseptic and lemon-scented cleaning fluid, a scent that would forever be associated in Inko Midoriya's mind with the moment her life pivoted on its axis. The doctor, a man with bushy mustaches and thick goggles that magnified his eyes, was tapping his pen against the clipboard. He looked from the X-rays on the light board to the small, green-haired boy sitting on the paper-covered table, swinging his legs. It's not often we see a mutation this absolute, the doctor said, finally breaking the silence. Inko twisted her hands in her lap. Is something wrong, doctor? Izuku has been complaining of feeling warm lately, and yesterday. Well, the incident with the toaster. The toaster, the doctor repeated, a dry chuckle escaping him. Mrs. Midoriya, based on these tests, your son didn't just break the toaster. He excited the air molecules inside the heating coils until they underwent a rapid thermal expansion. To put it simply, he detonated it. Izuku, 4 years old and wide-eyed, looked at his hands. Like Kaken? He chirped. Can I make pops like Kaken? The doctor leaned forward, his expression grave. No, young man. Not like Kaken. The bakugo boy, whom I assume you're referring to, sweats a nitroglycerin-like substance. He is a grenadier. He requires fuel. The doctor tapped Izuku's chest. You, Izuku, are a reactor. He turned the clipboard to Inko. The quirk registry will classify this under emitter, but the specifics are rare. He possesses a form of telekinetic molecular agitation. He can seize a pocket of air, or any matter, really, though gas is easiest, and vibrate the atoms until they combust. Instantly. At a distance, Inko paled. At a distance? Site-based targeting, currently. Range of about, let's say 10 meters for now. But as he grows? Mrs. Midoriya, your son is a walking artillery cannon. He doesn't need to touch things to destroy them. He just has to look at them, and want them gone. The doctor looked back at Izuku. We'll call it atomizer. Izuku smiled, a bright, innocent beam that didn't match the terrifying diagnosis. He held up a finger, pointing at a plastic model of a skeleton in the corner of the room. He scrunched his nose, focusing. Don't. Inko started. Crack. It wasn't a pop. It was the sound of a thunderclap trapped in a jar. A sphere of distorted air the size of a baseball materialized in the skeleton's ribcage. A split second later, a flash of pure white light erupted. The plastic ribs didn't just break, they vaporized. The shockwave knocked the doctor's clipboard to the floor and set the calendar on the wall flapping violently. Smoke curled from the hole where the skeleton's chest used to be. Izuku giggled, though his face flushed a deep, feverish red. Did you see, Mom? I did it. Inko stared at the molten plastic dripping onto the linoleum. She looked at her son, whose skin was radiating heat like a furnace door that had just been opened. She didn't feel pride. She felt a primal, terrifying awe. She pulled him into a hug, flinching at how hot his skin felt against hers. Yes, Izuku, she whispered, her voice trembling. You did it. 10 years later, the notebook lay open on the desk, filled with sketches of intricate support gear designs and thermodynamic equations. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. Most people assumed Izuku Midoriya scribbled fanfiction in these books. In reality, he was doing calculus. Managing a quirk like atomizer required a working knowledge of physics that most college students lacked. If he miscalculated the blast radius of a focused detonation by even 3%, he could rupture the eardrums of a hostage. If he failed to account for barometric pressure, his snipe shots could drift off target. Since you're all third years, it's time to think seriously about your futures. The teacher's voice cut through Izuku's concentration. He didn't look up, continuing to calculate the joule output required to knock a 200-pound villain unconscious without causing third-degree burns. I would hand out these career aptitude forms, the teacher continued, snatching the stack of papers from his podium and throwing them into the air with theatrical flair. But why bother? I know you all want to go to the hero track. The class erupted. Quirks flared across the room, stretched fingers, floating books, minor telekinesis. It was a display of individuality, a chaotic peacocking of power. Yes, you've all got wonderful quirks, the teacher said, waiting for the noise to die down. But remember, it's against the law to use them in school. Hey, teach! The voice was rough, arrogant, and cut through the chatter like a serrated knife. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet up on his desk, leaning back in his chair with a lazy, predatory grin. Don't lump me in with these extras, Bakugo scoffed. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. I'm the real deal. The class jeered, but Bakugo ignored them. He was used to the noise. He was talented, he was strong, and he had a quirk that made him the king of Aldera Junior High. Or at least the co-king. Ah, Bakugo, the teacher said, checking his list. You're aiming for UA High, aren't you? The murmurs turned into gasps. UA was the summit. The impossible fortress. That's right, Bakugo said, jumping onto his desk. I aced the mock exams. I'm the only one here with the stuff to surpass All Might. I'm going to be the richest, most famous hero of all time, and it starts with UA. Actually, the teacher interrupted, his eyes sliding to the back of the room. Midoriya is also applying to UA, isn't he? The room went dead silent. It wasn't the silence of mockery. In the world Izuku remembered from his childhood dreams, this would be the part where everyone laughed at the quirkless boy. But here, nobody laughed. They flinched. Bakugo froze. The cocky grin slid off his face, replaced by a twitching eye and a low, guttural growl. He turned his head slowly to look at the back of the class. Izuku sat there, his chin resting on his hand. He hadn't moved. He wore the standard black uniform, but he had modified it slightly, loose sleeves to allow for heat dissipation, and he never wore the tie. Midoriya. Bakugo hissed. Izuku looked up, his green eyes calm, bordering on bored. Yes, Kaken? Bakugo's hands began to smoke. Tiny pops and crackles of nitroglycerin popped against his palms. You think you can just walk into UA? You think you can stand on the same stage as me with that? That cheap trick of yours? It's not a trick, Izuku said softly. He tapped his pen against his notebook. And statistically, my written exam scores are higher than yours. If UA accepts based on merit, I have a 98% probability of entry. Bakugo lunged. It was instinct. He launched himself off his desk, his right hand raised, an explosion primed to blow Izuku's desk to splinters. Don't look down on me, you damn nerd! The class screamed. The teacher shouted for order, but Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't even stand up. He simply narrowed his eyes, focusing on the air 3 inches in front of Bakugo's face. Flash. There was no sound at first, just a sudden, violent displacement of air. A shockwave, localized and precise, slammed into Bakugo midair. It was like he had run face first into an invisible brick wall. Boom! Bakugo was thrown backward, tumbling over the rows of desks before skidding to a halt at the front of the classroom. He coughed, waving away the smoke, his face covered in soot but otherwise unharmed. Izuku had used a concussion blast. All force, no heat. Izuku lowered his gaze back to his notebook. Sit down, Kaken. You're disrupting my calculations. The class stared in horror. This was the dynamic of Aldera Junior High. Bakugo was the tyrant, loud and violent. But Izuku Midoriya? Izuku Midoriya was the nuclear deterrent. He was the quiet kid everyone walked on eggshells around. Because while Bakugo might burn you, Midoriya could turn you to ash without lifting a finger. Bakugo stood up, shaking with rage, veins popping in his forehead. You! Enough! The teacher finally found his spine. Bakugo, sit down. Midoriya, no quirks in class. Izuku shrugged. Self-defense, sensei. Bakugo sat, but he didn't stop glaring. His red eyes bored into Izuku's back. It wasn't just anger. It was an inferiority complex that had been festering for 10 years. Bakugo had to sweat, had to move, had to work for his power. Izuku just looked at things, and they obeyed. It drove Bakugo insane. School ended with the usual caution. Students gave Izuku a wide berth in the halls. He was used to it. The monster of Aldera. That's what they whispered. He didn't want to be a monster. He wanted to be a hero. Like All Might. A hero who saved people with a smile. But it was hard to smile when your body temperature ran at 102 degrees Fahrenheit naturally, and your quirk was designed solely for destruction. Izuku walked out the gates, adjusting his yellow backpack. He needed to take the long way home. He needed to cool off, literally. Using his quirk, even that small blast in class, spiked his internal temperature. If he didn't vent the heat, he'd get a migraine. He turned toward the underpass. The shade would be nice. Stupid Kaken, Izuku muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. He has so much mobility. The way he uses the recoil to dash. I need to figure out how to stabilize my flight without burning my shoes off. He pulled out his notebook, flipping to a page titled Propulsion Logic. If I emit a constant thermal wave from my soles and back, I can achieve lift, but the fuel consumption, or rather, the stamina drain, is too high. I need pulse detonations. Like a heartbeat. Boom boom boom. He was so deep in thought he didn't hear the manhole cover slide open behind him. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. A wet, gurgling voice hissed. Izuku stopped. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, not from fear, but from the shift in air pressure. He spun around. A massive wall of sludge rose from the sewer grate. Two manic, bulging eyes floated in the muck. You'll do nicely, kid. Just relax. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. The villain lunged. Canonically, Izuku Midoriya would have frozen. He would have been grabbed, suffocated, and nearly killed. But this Izuku had spent 10 years training his mind to be a targeting computer. Target acquired. Viscosity high. Composition fluid. Threat level lethal. Izuku stepped back, his eyes narrowing. He didn't panic. He focused on the center of the mass. Back off, Izuku warned. Feisty. The villain laughed, sending a tendril of sludge to wrap around Izuku's waist. Izuku didn't let it connect. He visualized the air molecules right in front of the tendril. Excitation. Combustion. Crack boom. A precision explosion detonated in the villain's face. The sludge scattered, splattering against the tunnel walls. The villain shrieked, recoiling. What the hell? The villain screamed. Fire? No, force? I said back off, Izuku said, his voice steady, though his heart was hammering. He raised his right hand, pointing 2 fingers at the villain like a gun. I can boil the water in your body if I have to. You're made of liquid, right? That makes you vulnerable to phase change. The villain hesitated. He saw the glow in the boy's eyes, a literal, physical luminescence. The air around Izuku was shimmering, distorting like the air above hot pavement. You brat! The villain shifted tactics. Instead of 1 tendril, he sent a dozen. A swarm of sludge lashing out from all angles. Izuku gritted his teeth. Too many targets. Can't snipe them all. He took a deep breath and held it. He focused not on a point outside, but on the energy radiating from his own skin. Omniblast. Izuku screamed as he released the safety valve. A sphere of pure, concussive heat erupted from his body, expanding outward in a perfect dome. The tunnel shook. The sludge villain was blasted backward, slamming into the concrete ceiling, then the walls, unable to find purchase against the wall of force pushing him away. But the effort cost him. Izuku dropped to one knee, panting. His skin was flushing a dangerous shade of red. Steam curled from his shoulders. The heat was building up. Damn it. Too hot. Need to cool down. The villain reformed, slower this time, but angry. You little. I'm going to wring your neck. He rushed forward while Izuku was recovering. Izuku raised his hand, his vision swimming slightly from the heat stroke creeping in. Clang. The manhole cover flew into the air again. Fear not. The voice boomed louder than any explosion. For I am here. A blur of blonde and American colors smashed into the tunnel. The wind pressure alone knocked Izuku flat on his back. All Might stood there, a titan of muscle, blocking the villain's path. Texas. Smash. The punch didn't even touch the villain. The wind pressure generated by the fist turned the sludge into mist. The villain was scattered, defeated instantly. Izuku lay on the concrete, staring up at the ceiling, gasping for air. The heat in his body was slowly dissipating, but his head throbbed. All Might was busy scooping the scattered sludge into soda bottles he had in his grocery bag. He worked with a speed that defied logic. Once the villain was contained, the number one hero turned to the boy on the ground. "Are you all right, young man?" All Might asked, flashing his signature grin. That was quite the commotion. "I apologize for getting you caught up in my justice ing." Izuku sat up, blinking. All Might? Indeed." All Might gave a thumbs up. He paused, looking at the scorch marks on the tunnel walls and the lingering steam coming off Izuku. "Say, did you do this? These blast marks?" Izuku nodded, scrambling to his feet. He ignored the dizziness. "Yes, sir. I tried to hold him off." All Might's smile didn't waver, but his eyes sharpened. He had seen the damage. It was controlled, mostly. But powerful. Extremely powerful for a middle schooler. Impressive quirk. All Might laughed. But dangerous. You must be careful not to cook yourself, eh? He pointed at Izuku's glowing red skin. "Ah, yes. Overheating is my drawback," Izuku stammered. He fumbled for his notebook. Can I have your autograph?" All Might quickly scribbled in the book. "Of course. Now, I must get this villain to the police. Stay out of trouble, young hero." And with a massive leap, he was gone, leaving a sonic boom in his wake. Izuku stood there, clutching the notebook. He felt dissatisfied. He had met his idol. He had survived. But All Might hadn't seen him. He had just seen a victim with a flashy quirk. "I didn't need saving," Izuku lied to himself. "I had him." He checked his temperature. 101.5 degrees. Manageable. He started the walk home. 20 minutes later, the world ended again. Izuku was walking through the Tatooine shopping district, reviewing the encounter in his head, when the explosion shook the ground beneath his feet. This wasn't one of his. This was uncontrolled. Messy. He looked up. Smoke was billowing from an alleyway 2 blocks down. Screams pierced the air. Without thinking, Izuku ran. When he arrived at the scene, the crowd was already pressing against the police tape. The heroes were there, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Empty Lady, but they were doing nothing. "Why aren't they fighting?" Izuku muttered, pushing to the front. Then he saw it, the sludge villain. He had escaped. All Might must have dropped the bottles, and he had a hostage. Embedded in the center of the muck, thrashing and screaming, was Katsuki Bakugo. "Let me go, you tar freak!" Bakugo roared. Explosions popped against the sludge, bright and violent, but it was making it worse. The explosions were igniting the fires around them, but the sludge just absorbed the impact and reformed. Bakugo was providing the villain with a smokescreen of fire and chaos. "I can't get close," Death Arms shouted, shielding his face. "The kid's explosions are too dangerous. And the villain has him deep. I need room," Empty Lady complained. "I can't grow here," Izuku stared. The heroes were bystanders. They were waiting for someone with the right quirk to show up. Bakugo's eyes met Izuku's through the smoke. There was no arrogance in them now. Just fear. Suffocating, desperate fear. And beneath that, a silent plea. "Help me." Izuku's legs moved before his brain gave permission. "Hey! Kid! Come back!" Death Arms shouted. Izuku ducked under the police tape. He didn't run blindly like he had in his childhood fantasies. He sprinted to a pile of debris about 15 meters from the villain and slid into a crouch behind a slab of concrete. He was in range. His heart hammered against his ribs. Analyze. Assess. Target, sludge villain. Hostage, Kaken. Obstacle, Kaken's erratic explosions. If Izuku fired a blast now, he risked igniting the nitroglycerin sweat covering Bakugo. A chain reaction could blow Bakugo's head off. "I need precision. I need to sever the hold, not blow it up." The villain saw him. "You again?" Bakugo's eyes went wide. "Deku? Get down, Kaken!" Izuku screamed. He raised both hands, framing the scene with his fingers. He wasn't aiming at the villain's body. He was aiming at the air between the sludge and Bakugo's face. He narrowed his eyes. The world slowed down. He could see the dust motes dancing in the air. He could feel the thermal currents, Focus. A microburst. High pressure, low heat. Cut him out. Izuku's pupils contracted. Atomizer, air blade. He snapped his fingers. A thin, razor-sharp distortion of air detonated right at the villain's eye. It wasn't a large explosion, it was a shaped charge. Bang! The villain shrieked as the blast pressure drove into his eye socket. His grip loosened instinctively. Now! Izuku yelled, standing up. Breathe! Bakugo took a massive gasp of air. Izuku didn't stop. He walked forward, his hands moving like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of violence. Left tendril. Detonate. Right tendril. Detonate. Pop pop pop. Controlled blast shattered the sludge holding Bakugo's arms. Izuku was surgical. He was carving the villain away from his friend using pure force. You little pest! The villain roared, gathering himself for a massive strike. He abandoned Bakugo, realizing the green-haired boy was the real threat. A tidal wave of muck rose up, blotting out the sun. Izuku stood his ground. He was overheating. His vision was blurring red. He had used too many precision shots in too short a time. I can't dodge this. He braced himself to take the hit, to burn every ounce of energy he had left in one final suicide blast. But he didn't have to. All Might appeared. Not with a smile, but with a grimace of pure effort. He wasn't in his buff form. He was steaming, halfway between forms, pushing past his limit. But he was there. He grabbed Bakugo's arm with one hand and Izuku's shirt with the other. I really am pathetic. All Might growled, blood dripping from his mouth. Relying on children to teach me what it means to act. He forced his muscle form to swell one last time. Detroit. Smash! The punch changed the weather. The updraft spiraled into the sky, creating a localized thunderstorm. The sludge villain was atomized, scattered to the winds. The fire was snuffed out by the vacuum. Rain began to fall. Izuku fell to his knees. The rain sizzled when it hit his skin, turning to steam instantly. He was boiling. The lecture was inevitable. Are you insane? Kamui Wood scolded, pointing a wooden finger at Izuku. You used an unlicensed quirk. You endangered the hostage. You could have killed him. Death Arms crossed his arms. You're lucky All Might showed up. You're just a kid. Leave this to the pros. Izuku sat on the back of an ambulance, an ice pack pressed to his forehead, and a cooling blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He didn't argue. He knew the laws, but he also knew that if he hadn't acted, Bakugo would be dead. Meanwhile, the heroes were fawning over Bakugo. That quirk is amazing. You were so brave. You held out for so long. Bakugo sat silently, a towel around his neck. He wasn't preening. He wasn't shouting. He was staring at the ground. Every now and then, his eyes flicked to Izuku. He saw the steam rising from Izuku. He saw the heroes scolding him, and he knew. He knew Izuku had saved him. He knew Izuku's shots had been perfect. He knew that while he was flailing and making things worse, Izuku had been calculating and effective. The gap had never been wider. It was twilight when Izuku finally walked home. The heat had faded to a dull thrum in his bones. Deku! Izuku stopped and turned. Bakugo stood at the end of the street. He was panting, like he had run all the way there to catch him. Kaken? Bakugo stood upright, his fists clenched at his sides. He was shaking. I didn't ask for your help. Bakugo yelled. His voice cracked. I was fine. I could have beaten him. You didn't save me. Don't look down on me. I'm going to be the #1 hero, and I don't need a damn nerd like you pitying me. He turned and stomped away without waiting for a response. Izuku watched him go. He sighed. He's welcome, I guess. He turned back toward his house. I am here. All Might slid out from around a corner, striking a pose. All Might? Izuku jumped back. Why are you here? You were surrounded by reporters. All Might laughed, then suddenly coughed, blood spraying from his mouth. In a puff of steam, he deflated into his true form, the skeletal, emaciated man. Izuku shrieked. You deflated. Keep it down, kid, All Might whispered, wiping his mouth. He leaned against the wall. This is the price I pay for my hero work. He looked at Izuku. The playfulness vanished from his sunken eyes. I watched you today, All Might said. At the tunnel. And in the market. Izuku looked down. I know. The other heroes scolded me. I moved without thinking. I know it was dangerous. It was, All Might agreed. But that is what makes a hero. Izuku looked up. Top heroes have stories about their school days, All Might continued. And most of them have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think. Izuku felt a lump form in his throat. You have a terrifying power, young Midoriya, All Might said. I saw the fear in the other heroes' eyes when they looked at you. They see a walking bomb. They see destruction. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. But I saw precision. I saw restraint. You have the power to destroy everything in your path, but you used it to carve a path to safety for someone else. You didn't fight to win, you fought to save. Tears pricked Izuku's eyes. I told you earlier to be careful, All Might said softly. But I was wrong. You don't need me to tell you how to be careful. You need someone to tell you that it's okay to be powerful. All Might smiled, not the mask, but a genuine, small smile. You are already a hero, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku crumpled. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest, and sobbed. It wasn't the words "you can be a hero." It was the validation that his power, the thing that made his mother look at him with fear and his classmates look at him with terror, could be used for good. However, All Might said, looking down at the crying boy. You are far from finished. You have the firepower of a tank, but the durability of a twig. If you want to enter UA, if you want to be the best, All Might pointed at him, you need to build a vessel capable of containing that heat. You apply to UA, right? Izuku nodded, wiping his eyes. Good, All Might said. Then I have a proposition for you. I'm not looking for a successor. I have plenty of time left, he lied smoothly. But I am looking for a student. Someone who understands that power is a burden, not a toy. He offered his hand to Izuku. Let's show them that Ground Zero isn't a place of destruction. It's where the rescue begins. What do you say? Izuku looked at the hand. He reached out, his grip firm. His skin was still warm, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a fever. It felt like fuel. Yes, sir! The sun set behind them, casting long shadows. Two heroes stood in the empty street. One, a fading legend. The other, a reactor just waiting to go critical. The eclipse was beginning. The smell of Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a unique cocktail of rotting kelp, rusted iron, and wet cardboard. For most, it was a dumping ground, a place where the city's refuse went to die. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a cooling tower. It was February, the dead of winter. The wind coming off the ocean was biting, carrying a chill that made normal people shiver and bundle into their coats. Izuku stood in the center of a clearing he had carved out of the trash, wearing nothing but a pair of gym shorts and a tank top soaked in sweat. Steam rolled off his shoulders in thick, white plumes, vanishing into the cold morning air. His skin was flushed to deep, sunburned red. Time! All Might's voice boomed from atop a pile of refrigerators. Izuku collapsed onto the sand, gasping for air. He didn't reach for a towel. He reached for a bucket of ice water that sat waiting. He dumped it over his head. Hiss! The water didn't just splash, it sizzled. A cloud of steam erupted around him, obscuring him from view for a moment. When the mist cleared, Izuku was panting, his skin slowly returning to a normal pigment. Temperature? All Might asked, sliding down the trash pile in his skeletal form, holding a digital thermometer gun. 99.8, Izuku rasped, checking the watch on his wrist that monitored his biometrics. Down from 104. Cooling cycle is improving. 6 months ago, it would have taken 10 minutes to vent that much heat. Now I can do it in 2. All Might nodded, jotting something down in a notebook that looked comically small in his hands. Your radiator system, that is to say, your cardiovascular endurance, is adapting. You're building more capillaries near the surface of your skin. It allows for faster heat exchange. But we're not there yet, young Midoriya. UA isn't going to give you a timeout to dump a bucket of water on your head. Izuku looked at his hands. They were callous, not just from lifting trash, but from the micro-burns of constant ignition. Over the last 10 months, his training with All Might had been a dual-pronged assault. Physically, he had to become a tank. The American Dream plan All Might had designed wasn't just about strength, it was about density. Izuku needed muscle mass to absorb the recoil of his blasts, and he needed a body capable of functioning while running a dangerously high fever. Most people passed out at 103 degrees. Izuku had to learn to do calculus at 105. Mentally, he had to become a sniper. Let's run the accuracy drill again, All Might said, picking up a stack of ceramic plates he had scavenged from a broken dish cabinet. Simulated hostage situation. Moving targets. Collateral damage is failure. Izuku stood up. He shook out his arms. He closed his eyes for a second, feeling the hum of energy in his gut, the pilot light that never went out. Ready, All Might spun, flinging a plate high into the air. It arced over the ocean. Izuku didn't move his body. He only moved his eyes. He tracked the white disk against the gray sky. He calculated the wind speed, approximate 15 miles per hour northeast, the trajectory, and the distance. He didn't fire a fireball. He didn't throw heat. He focused on a singular point of air pressure 2 inches below the plate. Snap! A sharp, dry crack echoed across the beach. An invisible hammer of compressed air struck the bottom of the plate, sending it spinning higher. 2! All Might shouted, throwing a second plate. Then a third. Izuku's eyes darted. Target A, apex of arc velocity 0. Target B, accelerating downward. He raised his right hand, making a gun shape with his fingers. Snap! Snap! The first plate shattered into dust. The second plate, however, he hit on the rim. It didn't shatter, it spun wildly off course and splashed into the water. Miss, Izuku muttered, frustration bubbling up. His body temperature spiked a fraction of a degree in response to the irritation. Precision, Izuku! All Might called out. You have the power of a nuclear warhead, but you must wield it like a scalpel. A hero who destroys the villain but buries the civilian in rubble is no hero at all. Izuku nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Again, they went until the sun was high in the sky. By the end, the beach was cleaner, not because they had moved the trash, but because Izuku had atomized a significant portion of the smaller debris during target practice. As they sat on the seawall, sharing a bento lunch, All Might looked at the boy. The transformation was stark. The timid, stuttering child was gone. In his place was a young man who looked at the world like it was a math problem he was determined to solve. You've cleared the entire section, All Might said, gesturing to the pristine sand. And your control, it is terrifying, if I may be honest. Izuku took a bite of rice. It's not enough. Kaken. Bakugo. His explosions are instantaneous. He relies on reflex. I rely on calculation. In a chaotic environment, calculation is slow. I need to get faster at the math. I need the physics to be instinct. You are comparing yourself to him again, All Might noted gently. I have to, Izuku said, staring at the horizon. He's the standard. He creates explosions from his body. I create them from the environment. If we fight, he has the speed advantage. I have the range advantage. But in the entrance exam, it's going to be a riot. I can't just snipe. I need to dominate the space. He pulled out his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 14, and opened it to a page titled Thermodynamic Propulsion. I've been working on the flight theory, Izuku said. If I emit a constant, low-yield thermal discharge from my soles and palms, I can achieve lift. Like a rocket thruster. But the heat buildup is exponential. I can maybe fly for 30 seconds? Before I risk heat stroke. All Might laughed, a spray of blood escaping his lips. 30 seconds is a lifetime in a fight, young Midoriya. Don't sell yourself short. You are ready. You have turned your body into a fortress and your mind into a supercomputer. Yue won't know what hit it. Izuku closed the book. He looked at his hand, clenching it into a fist. A faint shimmer of heat distorted the air around his knuckles. I'm going to eclipse him, Izuku whispered. I'm not going to be behind him anymore. The entrance exam. The gates of Yue High stood like the pearly gates of Olympus, daunting and magnificent. Thousands of students streamed through, a sea of black uniforms and nervous energy. Izuku walked among them, his yellow backpack secure on his shoulders. He wasn't muttering in fear today. He was muttering variables. Atmospheric pressure is 1013 millibars. Humidity is low, good for spark propagation. Concrete density. Out of my way, Deku. The voice was low, devoid of the usual screaming rage, but heavy with menace. Katsuki Bakugo walked past him, hands in his pockets. He didn't shove Izuku. He didn't stop. He just walked with the inevitability of a natural disaster. Good morning, Kaken, Izuku said calmly. Bakugo paused for a microsecond. He glanced back over his shoulder. His eyes were narrow slits. Don't choke. It would be boring if you failed before I got to crush you. I won't, Izuku replied. Bakugo scoffed, and kept walking. Izuku took a deep breath. The rivalry had shifted. Since the sludge villain incident, Bakugo hadn't physically bullied him. It was a cold war now. An arms race. Bakugo trained like a demon, and Izuku trained like a scientist. They were two stars orbiting each other, waiting to collide. Izuku was so focused on Bakugo's retreating back that he didn't see the girl's foot. He tripped. Gravity took hold. Izuku braced himself, not for impact, but to catch himself with a burst of air pressure against the ground. But he didn't hit the ground. He floated. Whoa! Are you okay? Izuku blinked. He was hovering 3 inches off the pavement. Beside him, a girl with a round face and brown bobbed hair was smiling, her hands held together in a release sign. I stopped you with my quirk, she said, blushing slightly. It's bad luck to fall before the exam, right? She released him, and he landed softly. Oh, Izuku said, adjusting his bag. Telekinetic gravity manipulation? Or zero-gravity induction via touch? The girl blinked, surprised. Zero gravity. I'm Uraraka Ochako, Midoriya Izuku. That's a versatile quirk. High rescue potential. Also useful for construction, debris removal, and orbital launch logistics. Uraraka laughed nervously. You're funny. You sound like a textbook. Well, good luck. She waved and ran off. Izuku stood there for a moment. Social interaction complete. Success rate moderate. No explosions caused. He walked into the auditorium. The written exam was child's play. Physics, history, quirk theory. Izuku finished 20 minutes early and spent the remaining time analyzing the structural integrity of the ceiling based on the beam layout. Then came the orientation. Present mic was loud. His voice was a quirk in itself, booming through the auditorium. Izuku sat next to Bakugo, which was awkward, but assigned seating was cruel like that. Welcome to the live performance. Mike screamed. Are you ready? Silence. Tough crowd. Mike launched into the explanation of the practical exam. 3 types of villain robots. Points assigned based on difficulty. Izuku began mumbling immediately. Robotics. Likely hydraulic or electric actuators. If hydraulic, target the joints for fluid rupture. If electric, electromagnetic pulse or extreme heat to melt the circuitry. 1-pointers are likely fast but fragile. 3-pointers will be tanky. Armor piercing required. Shut up, Bakugo hissed. It's tactical analysis, Izuku whispered back. It's annoying. Suddenly, a hand shot up in the row in front of them. A tall boy with glasses and stiff posture stood up. Sir, I have a question. The boy pointed at the pamphlet. There are 4 types of villains listed here. If this is a printing error, it is a stain on the reputation of UA, the most prestigious school in Japan. And you, the boy whipped around to point a finger directly at Izuku. You've been muttering this whole time. It's distracting. If you're here on a sightseeing trip, please leave immediately. The auditorium fell silent. All eyes were on Izuku. Izuku didn't shrink. He didn't stutter. He adjusted his collar, feeling the heat rise slightly under his skin from the embarrassment, but he kept his voice steady. I'm not sightseeing, Izuku said, his voice carrying clearly. I was calculating the thermal flashpoint of standard combat armor versus the structural weakness of exposed cabling. If you aren't analyzing the enemy before the battle starts, you're already at a disadvantage. The boy with glasses froze. His mouth opened, then closed. He adjusted his glasses. I see. A valid point. I apologize for the interruption. He sat down stiffly. Bakugo let out a short, sharp snort. It sounded almost like a laugh. Okay, okay, Mike shouted, trying to regain control. The examinee number 7111 is correct. The fourth robot is a zero-pointer. It's an obstacle. Think of it like a thwomp from Super Mario. Just run away. Battle Center B. Izuku stood in front of the massive gates of the mock city. He was wearing a dark green tracksuit with reinforced soles and gloves made of a heat-resistant polymer he had ordered online. He stretched his neck. The heat was already building. The anticipation was acting as a catalyst. He looked around. Uraraka was there. The glasses guy Ida was there. Start. There was no countdown. Present Mick's voice rang out from the tower. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 The crowd surged forward, a chaotic stampede of quirks. Izuku didn't run with the pack. He took a step back, looked up at the wall of the nearest building, a 4-story office block simulation, and focused. He pointed his palms behind him. Ignition. Boom. A blast of orange fire erupted from his hands. It wasn't a precision shot, it was raw propulsion. The force launched him upward. He twisted in the air, grabbing the fire escape on the second floor, swinging up, and vaulting to the roof. While the other students were bottlenecking at the main street, fighting over the first few robots, Izuku was sprinting across the rooftops. High ground secured, he muttered. He reached the edge of the building and looked down into the next intersection. It was teeming with robots. 2 3-pointers and a cluster of 1-pointers. Izuku raised his hand, his thumb and middle finger pressed together. He felt the air. He visualized the molecular lattice of the nitrogen and oxygen atoms hovering right above the fuel tank of the lead 3-pointer. Distance, 45 meters. Wind, negligible. Yield, low explosive, armor-piercing. Atomizer, snap. He snapped his fingers. Down on the street, 50 meters away, the air shrieked. A concentrated explosion materialized instantly inside the chassis of the giant robot. The machine didn't even have time to register a threat. Its upper torso expanded violently, metal shearing like paper, before exploding outward in a ball of fire. The other students on the street froze, shielding their faces from the debris raining down. What was that? Someone yelled. Izuku didn't stop. He turned his gaze to the cluster of 1-pointers. Multiple targets. Scatter shot. He swept his hand across his field of view, visualizing a chain of small detonations. Bang 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 bang. A line of explosions ripped through the street, taking out 4 robots in rapid succession. 16 points, Izuku counted, turning and running to the other side of the roof. He was a turret. He was artillery. While Bakugo was on the ground in Battle Center A, tearing robots apart with his bare hands and screaming, Izuku was in Battle Center B, playing a point-and-click adventure game. He moved from rooftop to rooftop, spotting targets, calculating the blast radius to ensure no other students were caught in the crossfire, and then deleting the robots from existence. In the observation room, a bank of monitors displayed the carnage. This year's crop is energetic, Midnight purred, watching a screen where Bakugo was dismantling a robot with savage glee. There's a lot of raw power, Cementos agreed. But look at this one. Battle Center B. He pointed to a screen showing Izuku. The camera angle was from a drone, looking down. Izuku was standing on a water tower. He looked calm. He simply pointed a finger at a robot 3 streets away. The robot exploded. Emitter type, Aizawa muttered, his eyes narrowing. Telekinetic combustion. Dangerous. Very dangerous. He holds the high ground, Nizu, the principal, squeaked happily. He's avoiding the melee, minimizing risk to himself, and maximizing his field of view. Smart. Very smart. But, does he have the stamina? Look at his biometrics. On the side of the screen, a heat graph showed Izuku. He was glowing. He's overheating, Recovery Girl noted. His internal temperature is passing 39 degrees Celsius. If he keeps that pace up, he'll cook his own brain. Let's see how he handles the pressure, Nizu said, his paw hovering over a large red button. True heroism appears only when the odds are impossible. He slammed the button. The ground shook. Izuku was currently at 48 points. He was sweating profusely. His vision was starting to get a little fuzzy at the edges, the first sign of heat exhaustion. I need to find water. I need to cool down. He was about to jump down to look for a vending machine. The mock city surely had them, when the vibration nearly knocked him off the roof. Doom, doom. It wasn't footsteps. It was an earthquake. At the far end of the main avenue, a shadow swallowed the street. The 0-pointer. It was colossal. Taller than the buildings. Its green paint was chipped, its red eyes glowing like searchlights. It smashed a hand into a skyscraper, crumbling the facade like it was made of Lego. Dust billowed out, choking the street. The students on the ground screamed, "It's huge! Run! Don't fight it! It's just an obstacle! Go!" The retreat was instantaneous. It was a stampede of fear. Izuku stood on his rooftop, staring up at the Titan. Size estimation, 60 meters. Mass, thousands of tons. Threat level, catastrophic. He turned to run. That was the logical move. He had enough points. He was overheating. Engaging this thing was suicide. Go home, cool off, wait for the acceptance letter. He took a step away. Help! The voice was small, buried under the rumble of collapsing concrete. Izuku stopped. His head whipped around. His eyes scanned the dust cloud below. There, Uraraka Ochako. She was on the ground, trapped under a slab of concrete that had fallen from the building the robot had struck. She was struggling, her face pale with pain. The 0-pointer was looming over her. Its massive tank treads were grinding the pavement, inching closer. It wasn't targeting her specifically, she was just in the way. Collateral damage. The students were running away. They didn't see her. Or if they did, they were too scared to stop. Izuku's brain stopped calculating points. It stopped calculating wind speed. It stopped calculating acceptance probabilities. The equation simplified to a single variable. If I do nothing, she dies. Logic vanished. Instinct took the wheel. Izuku didn't jump. He launched. He faced away from the robot, and unleashed a massive blast from his back and feet simultaneously. The force was violent. It kicked up a cloud of dust on the roof and shot him forward like a missile. He flew through the air, fighting the G-force. The heat in his body spiked. 102 degrees. 103. He landed on the street, skidding to a halt between Uraraka and the robot. Midoriya? Uraraka gasped, clutching her trapped leg. Don't move, Izuku commanded. His voice was different. It wasn't the polite boy from the gate. It was strained, tight with pain and focus. He looked up. The 0-pointer was directly above them. Its giant metal hand was descending, reaching out to crush the debris, and them, to clear a path. Izuku couldn't lift the debris. He wasn't strong enough. He couldn't blast the debris. The shockwave would hurt her. He had to kill the robot. But it was huge. A standard blast wouldn't dent it. He needed something stronger. Something he had only theorized about in his notebooks. Equation 44, Izuku muttered, his skin glowing so bright it was visible through his tracksuit. Thermal compression. Railgun principle. He planted his feet. He raised both hands, cupping them together, as if holding a ball. He wasn't aiming at the robot's face. He was creating a vacuum tunnel. He focused. He pulled the heat from his entire body, every ounce of fever, every bit of excess energy generated by his metabolism, and funneled it into the space between his palms. The air around him began to warp. The asphalt beneath his feet started to melt. Warning, overheat, his watch beeped. Shut up, Izuku growled. The robot's hand was 10 meters away. 5. Izuku screamed. Atomizer, solar flare. He didn't just explode the air. He ignited a column of plasma. A beam of blinding, white-hot energy erupted from his hands. It wasn't a projectile. It was a continuous stream of devastation. The recoil was horrific. Izuku's feet dug trenches into the melting road. The beams slammed into the 0-pointer's palm. It didn't push the hand back. It drilled through it. Molten metal sprayed like water. The beam continued upward, striking the robot's neck. KRKOM. The sound was deafening. The shockwave shattered the windows of every building within 3 blocks. The 0-pointer's head didn't fly off. It vaporized. A hole 5 meters wide was punched clean through the upper chassis. The circuitry melted instantly. The giant machine groaned, the sound of dying metal, and then went limp. It tilted backward, falling away from them with a ground-shaking crash. Silence returned to Battle Center B. Izuku stood there, his arms smoking. His tracksuit sleeves had burned away. His skin was a terrifying shade of crimson, veins pulsing against his temples. He turned slowly to Uraraka. His eyes were glassy. "Are you okay?" he slurred. Then his eyes rolled back in his head. His internal temperature hit 106. The safety breaker in his brain tripped. He collapsed face forward onto the pavement. The aftermath. "Make way! Make way!" Recovery girl bustled through the crowd of stunned students. The practical exam was over. The siren had sounded. She knelt beside Izuku. "Good heavens, look at this boy. He's a radiator." She placed a hand on his forehead. "Too hot for my quirk to work yet. I can't accelerate his healing if his cells are boiling. We need ice. Someone get the cooling packs from the medical bot." Ida Tenya ran forward, carrying a medical kit. He looked down at the unconscious boy, the one he had scolded for muttering. He looked at the smoking remains of the giant robot. He took that thing out in one hit," Ida whispered, adjusting his glasses. His hands were trembling. "I judged him for being distracted, but he was the only one who saw the threat to a fellow student. He sacrificed his own safety." Uraraka was being helped up by a medic bot. She looked at Izuku, her eyes wide with worry. "Please save him." "He saved me." 1 week later, the apartment was quiet. Inko Midoriya was pacing in the kitchen, nervously shredding a napkin. Izuku sat at the dining table. He was fully recovered, thanks to Recovery Girl and a few days of ice baths, but the anxiety was a different kind of fever. He hadn't scored a single point in the last 10 minutes of the exam. He had 48 combat points. Was that enough? The cutoff was usually higher. And he had caused massive property damage. Did they deduct points for melting the street? The mail slot clattered. Inko shrieked. "It's here! Izuku! It's here!" She grabbed the envelope and slid it onto the table like it was a live bomb. Izuku stared at the wax seal of UA. He took a deep breath. He picked it up and went to his room. He needed to do this alone. He sat at his desk, the same desk where he had spent countless nights drawing hero costumes and calculating blast yields. He tore the envelope open. A metal disc slid out and clattered onto the desk. A hologram projection sprang to life. "I am here!" Izuku jumped back, nearly falling out of his chair. "All Might? As a projection?" All Might bellowed from the tiny screen. He was wearing a yellow suit that looked 2 sizes too small. "I had to do a lot of paperwork, but I am teaching at UA starting this year." Izuku's heart hammered. His mentor was his teacher, young Midoriya. All Might leaned into the camera. "You passed the written exam with flying colors. But the practical? 48 villain points. A respectable score, but perhaps on the edge of the cutoff." Izuku's stomach dropped. "However," All Might slammed his fist onto the desk in the video. "You didn't think that was it, did you? Listen here." The video cut away. It showed grainy footage from the control room. It showed Uraraka standing before the judges. "Please!" The video Uraraka pleaded. "Give him my points. He saved me. I would have been crushed if he hadn't stepped in. He looked like he was going to explode, but he did it anyway." Izuku felt tears prick his eyes. "You risked your life to save others." All Might's voice returned. "And that is the essence of a hero. How can a hero course reject one who saves people and does the right thing? It cannot." A scoreboard appeared on the hologram. Izuku Midoriya, villain points, 48, rescue points, 60, total, 108, 60 rescue points. All Might shouted. "A perfect score in heroism. Midoriya Izuku, you passed with the highest score in the exam." The image of All Might reached out a hand. "Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia." The hologram faded. Izuku sat there in the silence of his room. He looked at his hands, the hands that could destroy buildings, the hands that scared his mother, the hands that Bakugo hated. He clenched them into fists. He didn't cry. Not this time. He smiled. A fierce, determined smile. "I calculated the odds," he whispered to the empty room. "And I beat them. The Bakugo residents. Katsuki Bakugo stared at his own hologram. Katsuki Bakugo. Villain points, 77. Rescue points 0. Total, 77. He had crushed it. 77 points was a massive score. He had destroyed more robots than anyone. But then he saw the ranking list scroll by at the end of the message. 1. Midoriya Izuku 108 points. 2. Bakugo Katsuki 77 points. Bakugo stared at the name. The name that used to mean useless. The metal disc in his hand started to smoke. Small pops of nitroglycerin crackled against the surface. Deku. He didn't scream. He didn't throw the projector against the wall. He squeezed the disc until it crunched, the metal twisting under his grip. His face was a mask of cold, absolute fury. You didn't just get in, Bakugo whispered, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. You looked down on me. You held back, and you still beat me. He stood up, kicking his chair aside. I'll kill you, he vowed, not to the room, but to the universe. I'll crush you until there's nothing left but ash. The rivalry had officially begun. And for the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo was the underdog. The morning of the first day at UA High began not with a frantic dash for toast, but with a calibration check. Izuku Midoriya stood before the full-length mirror in his bedroom, adjusting the collar of his uniform. The standard UA blazer was gray with green accents, a sharp, prestigious garment that screamed hero in training. For Izuku, however, it was a potential heat trap. He tugged at the undershirt beneath the button-down. It was a custom-made compression garment, woven with a synthetic polymer mesh designed by a support company he'd found online. It contained pockets of endothermic gel that reacted to his body heat, providing a passive cooling effect. Core temperature, 98.9 degrees, he muttered, checking the biometric watch on his left wrist. Acceptable. He looked at his reflection. The boy staring back wasn't the trembling, scrawny kid from middle school. His shoulders were broader, filled out by 10 months of hellish physical conditioning under All Might. His hands were wrapped in thin, breathable tape to protect his knuckles from the microabrasions caused by rapid-fire detonations. But the biggest change was in the eyes. They were calculating. They were the eyes of an engineer looking at a machine, waiting for it to fail so he could fix it. Izuku! You're going to be late. Inko's voice drifted up from the kitchen. Coming, Mom! He grabbed his yellow backpack, a new one, made of fire-resistant Kevlar, and headed downstairs. The air outside was crisp, a stark contrast to the furnace that constantly roared inside his ribcage. As he walked to the train station, Izuku ran the variables of the day through his head. Variable 1, social integration. He was awkward. He knew that. He spent more time with physics textbooks than people. Variable 2, the curriculum. UA was elite. The coursework would be rigorous. Variable 3, Bakugo. Izuku paused at the crosswalk, his breath hitching slightly. Katsuki Bakugo. The boy who had been his son and his shadow for 15 years. The entrance exam results. Izuku in first place, Bakugo in second, had shattered the delicate ecosystem of their rivalry. Bakugo hadn't screamed at him since the results came out. He hadn't texted. He hadn't even looked at him. That silence was more terrifying than any explosion. UA High School, Class 1A. The door to Class 1A was massive. It stood nearly 20 feet tall, a testament to the school's accommodation for mutation-type quirks. It was intimidating, designed to make you feel small before you even stepped inside. Izuku stood before it, his hand hovering over the handle. Just open it. It's just a door. Statistically, the people inside are just teenagers like you. He slid the door open. Don't put your feet on the desk. Huh! It's disrespectful to the upperclassmen who used these desks before us, and to the craftsmen who built them, like I care about some old desk. What junior high are you from, you four-eyed extra? Izuku froze. The voices were familiar. Inside, Tenya Ida, the stiff, glasses-wearing boy from the exam, was chopping the air with his hand, scolding Bakugo. Bakugo was sitting with his feet propped up, looking like he owned the place. Bakugo's eyes flicked to the door. The scowl on his face didn't deepen. It didn't soften. It just solidified. He stared at Izuku with the intensity of a laser sight. Oh! It's you! Ida turned around. He marched toward Izuku with the mechanical precision of a robot. I am Ida Tenya, from Semi-Private Academy. I heard, Izuku stammered, his social anxiety momentarily overriding his analytical cool. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Midoriya, Ida said, his voice dropping to a reverent tone. I must apologize. During the entrance exam, I misjudged you completely. I thought you were distracted, but you had already perceived the true nature of the test. You realized that saving others was the core criteria. I hate to admit it, but you are the better student. Izuku blinked. I didn't really realize that. I just reacted. That makes it even more impressive. Ida boomed. Hey! It's the Deku who falls down. Izuku looked past Ida to see Uraraka Ochako beaming at him. You made it. I mean, of course you did. Your punch on that giant robot was insane. Like kaboom. She mimed an explosion with her hands. The class went quiet. The word kaboom seemed to trigger a realization. Wait, a boy with red spiky hair whispered to his neighbor. Is that him? The guy who melted the 0-pointer? Yeah, a girl with earphone jacks nodded. I heard he scored perfect rescue points. He's the one who almost blew up the street. Eyes turned to Izuku. They weren't looking at him with the disdain of Aldera Middle School. They were looking at him with wariness. Respect. Fear. He was the walking reactor rumors had spread about. Izuku felt the heat rising in his neck. Drawback of the quirk. Emotions trigger temperature spikes. If you're here to make friends, you can pack up and leave. The voice came from the floor. Izuku looked down. Lying in a yellow sleeping bag like a metamorphic caterpillar was a man with tired eyes and messy black hair. He sucked on a jelly pouch with aggressive lethargy. This is the hero course, the man said, unzipping the bag and standing up. He looked like a hobo, but the sheer aura of authority he projected was suffocating. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is limited. You kids are not rational enough. He stepped out of the sleeping bag, revealing a black outfit and a capture scarf wound around his neck. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota. Nice to meet you, the class gasped. Homeroom teacher? Aizawa fished a blue gym uniform out of his bag and tossed it at Izuku, who caught it by reflex. Put these on and head to the grounds, Aizawa droned. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. The P grounds. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The air was dry. Perfect conditions for combustion. The 20 students of Class 1A stood in a cluster, wearing their UA gym uniforms. Izuku had left his blazer behind, but he kept his compression undershirt on beneath the gym track top. He needed the cooling. A quirk apprehension test? Uraraka asked. What about the entrance ceremony? The guidance counselor meeting? Aizawa stood with his back to them, looking at a digital tablet. If you want to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events. UA's selling point is its freedom. That applies to the teachers as well. He turned to face them. His eyes were dark, devoid of warmth. Softball throw. Standing long jump. 50-meter dash. Endurance running. Grip strength. Upper body training. Seated toe touch. Sit-ups. You did these in middle school, right? No quirks allowed. The country still insists on prohibiting quirks when calculating the average of these records. It's not rational. The Ministry of Education is procrastinating. Aizawa pointed a finger at the center of the group. Bakugo. You finished second in the practical exam. In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? Bakugo stepped forward. His posture slouched but his muscles tense. 67 meters. Try doing it with your quirk. Bakugo walked into the painted circle. He picked up the ball. A feral grin spread across his face. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle, Aizawa said. Hurry up. Give it all you've got. Bakugo wound up. He didn't just throw the ball. He added a rotational torque to his body, using his waist as a fulcrum. Dai-ai! Boom! A massive explosion erupted from his palm at the moment of release. The blast was red and angry, sending a shockwave that ruffled the hair of the students standing 20 meters away. The ball vanished into the sky, leaving a trail of smoke. Aizawa held up his tablet to show the class. 705.2 meters. Whoa! 700 meters? Is he a monster? This looks like fun. Fun? Aizawa's voice cut through the excitement like a guillotine. You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? He lowered the tablet. A cruel, jagged smile appeared on his face. All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential, and will be punished with expulsion. The silence that followed was absolute. Expulsion? Uraraka shrieked. It's the first day. That's too unreasonable. Natural disasters. Big accidents. Selfish villains, Aizawa listed, brushing his hair back. Calamities whose time or place can't be predicted. Japan is covered in unfairness. Heroes are the ones who reverse those situations. If you wanted to go to Mickey D's after school, too bad. For the next 3 years, Yui will do all it can to crush you. Welcome to the hero course. Izuku swallowed hard. He looked at the other students. They were terrified, but Izuku wasn't. He adjusted his gloves. He felt the familiar hum of the atomizer quirk beneath his skin. This was a test of volatility. It was a test of output. I have to win, Izuku thought. I can't just pass. I have to dominate. He looked at Bakugo. Bakugo was staring at him. 705 meters. That's the benchmark. Test 1, 50-meter dash. The students paired off. Ida Tenya was up first against a frog-like girl named Azuri. Ida's engines roared, and he crossed the line in 3.04 seconds. A blur of blue and exhaust. Like a fish in water, Azuri commented as she hopped across in 5.58 seconds. Next group, the robot camera announced. Bakugo Katsuki. Midoriya Izuku. The tension spiked instantly. Bakugo walked to the line, rolling his shoulders. Don't blink, Deku. You'll miss me leaving you in the dust. Izuku stepped up. He didn't get into a sprinter's crouch. He stood upright, his back slightly arched, his arms held out to his sides like stabilizer wings. Ready. Bakugo's hand sparked. He was going to use his explosions to propel himself backward, blasting the air to shoot forward. Izuku visualized the air behind his calves and shoulder blades. Vector calculation, forward thrust. Angle, 15 degrees upward to reduce friction. Start, bang, whoosh. 2 sounds tore the air apart. Bakugo exploded off the line, a series of rapid pop-pop-pop explosions propelling him forward. He was fast. Incredibly fast. But Izuku was a jet. A continuous, low-roar blast of heat and pressure erupted from Izuku's back and heels. He didn't run. He hovered 3 inches off the ground, carried by a wave of thermal propulsion. He was a human missile. The heat washed over the track, shimmering the air. They crossed the line almost simultaneously. Bakugo, 4.13 seconds. Midoriya, 4.10 seconds. Izuku killed the thrust and skidded to a halt, the soles of his shoes smoking. He turned to look at the board. 0.03 seconds, Izuku muttered. Close. My startup lag is higher than his because I have to ionize the air first. He has instantaneous ignition. Bakugo stared at the time. He stared at Izuku. His hands twitched. You flew, Bakugo ground out. It's thermodynamic levitation, Izuku corrected, wiping sweat from his brow. Inefficient for long distances, but for 50 meters, it's viable. Bakugo didn't reply. He just turned and walked away, his aura radiating pure murder. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku grabbed the dynamometer. He squeezed. Unlike the dash, he couldn't use his quirk here. Explosions pushed things away. They didn't pull things together. I have to rely on the muscle. He gritted his teeth, channeling the raw physical power he had built hauling trash at Dagoba Beach. Beep. 70 kilograms. Whoa! 540 kilograms? Izuku looked over. Mizo Shoji, a boy with multiple arms, had crushed the machine. Impressive, Izuku noted. Mutant type. Enhanced musculature. Bakugo scored a 65 kilograms. He glared at Izuku's 70. Pure muscle? Bakugo sneered. I guess you did more than just read books all year. I had a good teacher, Izuku said simply. Test 3, standing long jump. This was trivial for both of them. Bakugo blasted himself across the sandbox, clearing it easily. Izuku stood at the edge. He looked at the sand. Downward thrust. 40% output. He jumped, and as he reached the apex of his natural arc, he detonated the air beneath his feet. Thump! The air hardened into a platform for a split second, launching him forward again. It was a double jump. He cleared the sandbox and landed on the grass beyond. Aizawa watched, jotting notes. Midoriya. Good application. High mobility. But the heat output. He looked at the thermal camera on his tablet. Izuku's shoes were glowing red. Test 4, repeated sidesteps. This was Izuku's weakness. Mineta, the small boy with great balls on his head, dominated this event, bouncing back and forth like a pinball. Izuku tried to use small bursts of air to shunt himself side to side, but the control required was too precise. He ended up overshooting or losing balance. Damn it, Izuku hissed, stumbling. He finished with an average score. Bakugo beat him here, his reflexes and agility superior without quirk assistance. Not so perfect now, are you? Bakugo taunted as he passed by. Izuku wiped his face. He was sweating heavily now. His internal temperature was climbing. 100.5 degrees. Test 5, the ball throw. This was the main event. Uraraka stepped up. She touched the ball, floated it, and then lightly tapped it. It drifted upward. And kept going. And going. Aizawa showed the tablet. Infinity. The class lost their minds. Infinity? That's cheating. That's amazing. Midoriya, Aizawa called out. You're next. Izuku walked to the circle. He picked up the ball. It felt light. He stood in the center, closing his eyes for a moment. He needed to focus. The heat in his body was a dull roar now. He could use it. He opened his eyes. Strategy. If I use a single massive blast, I risk vaporizing the ball or hurting someone. I need sustained acceleration. A railgun effect. He assumed a throwing stance. He wound back. Midoriya, Aizawa said. Izuku paused. Your quirk, Aizawa said, his eyes glowing red, his hair floating up. It's called atomizer, correct? It causes rapid thermal expansion at a target point. Yes, sir. It's a bazooka, Aizawa said flatly. Bakugo's quirk is a grenade. Yours is an artillery shell. If you fire that thing at full power in a populated area, you don't just stop the villain. You melt the hostage. You shatter windows for 3 blocks. You cause deafness in civilians. Aizawa stepped closer, his capture scarf loosening. I saw the footage of the 0-pointer. You melted a hole through 5 feet of reinforced steel. But you also cooked your own internal organs to do it. You collapsed. If you do that in the field, you're just a liability that needs saving. Izuku gripped the ball tighter. I know. Then show me, Aizawa said, his quirk deactivating, his hair falling back down. Show me you're not just a walking nuke. Show me you can control the yield. Izuku nodded. He turned back to the field. Control. Not a nuke. A rocket. He threw the ball. He didn't use his quirk on his arm. He threw it with normal human strength. The ball arced up, weak and pathetic. Is that it? Someone whispered. Then, the ball reached about 10 meters out. Izuku's eyes narrowed. He locked onto the space directly behind the ball. Stage 1 ignition. Snap. A small, concentrated explosion detonated just behind the ball. The shockwave slammed into it, boosting its velocity. The ball shot forward. Stage 2, acceleration. Izuku tracked the blurring object. Snap. Another blast. Harder this time. The ball broke the sound barrier. A white cone of vapor formed around it. Stage 3, escape velocity. Izuku gritted his teeth. The heat flared in his head. He focused on the distant speck in the sky. Snap. 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 3 rapid-fire detonations, each one further away, each one pushing the ball faster and higher. It was a pulse detonation engine drive. The ball turned into a streak of light, angling sharply upward into the stratosphere. Boom. The delayed sonic booms rolled back over the students, shaking the ground. Izuku lowered his hand. Smoke curled from his fingertips. He panted, his face flushed. Aizawa looked at the tablet. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned it to the class. Infinity. It went into orbit? Kaminari shrieked. Seriously? He turned the ball into a multi-stage rocket, Yaoyorozu Momo whispered, her eyes wide. The physics calculations required to hit a moving object at that speed with a shockwave. He's doing differential calculus in his head. Izuku looked at Aizawa. I didn't use full power. I used multiple low-yield charges to maintain structural integrity of the projectile while maximizing distance. Aizawa's expression didn't change, but his eyes softened by a fraction. Rational. You minimize the local blast radius while maximizing the result. Better. DKU. The screen tore through the all. Izuku flinched. Bakugo was charging. He wasn't running. He was blasting across the grass, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Tell me how you did that. You're quirkless. You're supposed to be a pebble on the side of the road. His right hand raised, sparking with a massive explosion. He was going to kill him. Izuku didn't move. He couldn't. His body was overheated, his reflexes slowed. I can't dodge. I have to counterblast. Izuku raised his hand, preparing to detonate the air in front of Bakugo's face. Swish. Suddenly, scarves wrapped around Bakugo's body like steel pythons. His arms were yanked back, the explosion dying in his palm with a pathetic fizzle. What the? Bakugo struggled against the cloth. Let me go! Don't make me use my quirk so much, Aizawa muttered. His hair was floating again, his eyes glowing red. I have dry eye. Erase her head. Izuku gasped. The underground hero. We're wasting time, Aizawa said, releasing Bakugo. The boy stumbled forward, catching himself. Aizawa glared at Bakugo. Bakugo. Act like a child again, and I'll expel you before the results are even posted. This is a military academy, not a playground for your temper tantrums. Bakugo froze. He looked at Aizawa, then at Izuku. He stood up slowly. He adjusted his shirt. He didn't say a word. He just walked back to the group, his eyes shadowed. The look he gave Izuku wasn't the usual explosive rage. It was cold. It was calculating. For the first time, Bakugo wasn't looking at a bug. He was looking at a rival. A threat. The results. The sun was beginning to set by the time the test concluded. The class gathered around the digital board. I'll just show you the results all at once, Aizawa said. It's a pain to explain verbally. He tapped a button. The holographic list appeared. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu, creation is versatile. 2. Izuku Midoriya, high scores in dash, throw, jump, strength. 3. Shoto Todoroki, consistent high performance. 4. Katsuki Bakugo, top-tier athleticism, dragged down by ball throw being beaten. 20. Minoru Mineta. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Second place. He was second. By the way, Aizawa said, turning to walk away. The expulsion thing was a lie. Way out? The class screamed in unison. It was a logical ruse to draw out your upper limits, Aizawa said, scratching his neck. I knew it, Yaoyorozu said, holding a hand to her chest. It was obvious if you thought about it. That was a little scary though, Cyril whispered. Izuku watched Aizawa walk away. He noticed the teacher pause and glance back at them, specifically at him and Bakugo. A lie? Izuku thought. No. I saw his eyes. If I had failed to control my power, if I had melted the ball, he would have sent me home. Midoriya. Izuku turned. Bakugo stood there. The other students were heading back to the changing rooms, chattering about the lie. But Bakugo remained. You've been hiding it, Bakugo said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. I haven't, Izuku said. I got my quirk late. You know that. The doctor said. I don't care what the doctor said, Bakugo cut him off. He stepped closer, invading Izuku's personal space. You've been watching me. Taking notes. Calculating. He pointed a finger at Izuku's chest. You think you're better than me because you have a fancy laser beam? Because you can fly? No, Kak and I'm going to tear you apart, Bakugo whispered. I'm going to study your style. I'm going to figure out your limits. And then I'm going to crush you so bad that you will have no choice but to recognize who the real number one is. He turned and walked away. Izuku stood alone on the field. The cooling gel in his shirt had long since warmed up. He felt sticky and exhausted. But he also felt relief. The bubble had burst. The secret was out. He wasn't the quirkless Deku anymore. He was a contender. He looked at his hand. He clenched it. I won't lose, he whispered to the wind. Not to you. Not to anyone. Faculty office. Aizawa sat at his desk, putting eye drops in his eyes. So, All Might leaned around the corner, grinning. You didn't expel anyone. I knew you had a soft spot. They have potential, Aizawa grunted. But that Midoriya kid, he did well, didn't he? He's a problem, Aizawa said. He pulled up Izuku's file on his computer. His quirk is too volatile. He treats every situation like a math problem because he's terrified of his own power. He knows if he miscalculates, people die. Aizawa looked at All Might. He doesn't have the ego of a hero yet. He has the mindset of a bomb disposal technician. He's trying to defuse himself. All Might stopped smiling. Is that bad? It's sustainable for now, Aizawa said. But sooner or later, he's going to be in a situation where he can't calculate. Where he just has to burn. And when that happens, we'll see if he's a hero or just a disaster waiting to happen. Aizawa closed the file. Ground Zero, Aizawa muttered, reading the provisional hero name Izuku had scribbled in the margin of his application. Fitting. The locker room smelled of fresh neoprene and nervous anticipation. It was the smell of metamorphosis. Izuku Midoriya stood in front of his open locker, staring at the metal case inside. The hero costume. It was more than just clothes. It was a declaration of intent. It was the skin of the hero he wanted to become. He pulled the case out and popped the latches. Inside lay a suit of dark green and black. But unlike the jumpsuit his mother might have sewn in a different life, this was a piece of industrial engineering. Izuku had designed it, but the support company had refined it into something sleek and predatory. The base layer was a high-grade, heat-resistant polymer weave, similar to the material used in firefighter proximity suits, but flexible enough for gymnastics. Running along the arms, legs, and spine were glowing orange tubes, cooling conduits filled with a liquid nitrogen-based solution that circulated when his body temperature hit critical levels. On his hands were gloves made of a thick, white ceramic composite, designed to focus his blasts and protect his fingers from the immediate flashpoint of his detonations. And on his face, a respirator mask. Not to filter toxins, but to supercool the air he inhaled, keeping his core temperature manageable from the inside out. Whoa, Midoriya! That looks intense. Izuku turned. Eijiro Kirishima was grinning, shirtless, holding a pair of gear-like shoulder pads. It looks like you're ready to walk into a volcano. Izuku smiled, pulling the suit on. It was heavy, grounding. With my quirk, I essentially am a volcano. If I don't dress for it, I burn. Across the room, Katsuki Bakugo was silent. He was already dressed. His costume was a statement of aggression: black tank top, baggy pants, and those massive, grenade-shaped gauntlets. He stood with his back to the room, adjusting the pin on his right gauntlet. The tension between them was a physical weight in the room. The other boys sensed it, giving them a wide berth. They were two planetary bodies with too much gravity, threatening to tear the room apart if they got too close. Midoriya, Bakugo said. He didn't turn around. Izuku paused, clicking his belt into place. Yes, Kaken? Don't think that suit is going to save you, Bakugo whispered, his voice low and rough like grinding stones. Armor just means I have to hit you harder to break you. Izuku adjusted his gloves, the ceramic plates clicking together. He looked at Bakugo's back, the back he had chased for 10 years. It's not armor, Kaken, Izuku replied calmly. It's a cooling system. I'm not worried about you breaking me. I'm worried about melting the building. Bakugo stiffened. He slammed his locker shut with enough force to dent the metal, then stormed out of the room without another word. Ground Beta. I am here. All Might's voice boomed through the mock city, echoing off the concrete canyons. He stood at the entrance to the observation tunnel, wearing his Silver Age costume, his cape fluttering in a wind that seemed to exist solely for dramatic effect. Coming through the door like a hero, the class gasped in admiration. To see the symbol of peace in the flesh, teaching them, was surreal. Welcome to Hero Basic Training, All Might announced, striking a pose. Today, we stop the books and start the battles. Combat training. He looked over the students, his eyes lingering for a moment on Izuku. The boy looked like a tactical operative. The glowing tubes on his suit gave him a sci-fi edge, a stark contrast to the colorful spandex of his peers. And Bakugo. Bakugo looked like a warlord. Excellent costumes, embryos. All Might shouted. Remember, the clothes make the man, and today, you are heroes. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Now, the scenario. Villains have hidden a nuclear weapon in the hideout. Heroes must secure it or capture the villains within the time limit. Sir. Tenya Ida raised his hand. He was encased in white armor that made him look like a high-performance engine block. How will teams be decided? Lottery. All Might declared, shaking the box. Because in the field, you often have to team up with heroes from other agencies on the fly. The drawing began. Team A, Izuku Midoriya Ochako Uraraka. Team B, Shoto Todoroki Mizo Shoji. Team D, Katsuki Bakugo Tenya Ida. Izuku froze. He looked at the ball in his hand. Team A. First matchup. All Might reached into 2 boxes labeled villains and heroes. He pulled out 2 balls. Team A are the heroes. Team D are the villains. The air left Izuku's lungs. It wasn't just a chance encounter. It felt like fate. The universe was demanding a confrontation. Across the crowd, Bakugo turned slowly. His mask covered his eyes, but his grin was visible, a savage, predatory baring of teeth. He punched his palm with a small explosion. Pop. Fate hates me, Uraraka whispered, looking pale. We have to fight Bakugo. Izuku took a deep breath. The cooling fluid in his suit hummed quietly, a reassuring vibration against his spine. He looked at Uraraka. No, Izuku said, his voice steady. We don't have to fight him. We have to win. The planning phase. The building was a 5-story concrete shell. Dark, dusty, and filled with blind corners. In the villain's setup room on the 5th floor, Ida was pacing. Bakugo-kun. We must take this seriously. Ida gestured to the papier-mâché bomb in the corner. Midoriya was top of the class in the entrance exam. His firepower is immense. We need to fortify the room. I suggest we clear the furniture to create barricades in. Shut up, Bakugo growled. He was standing by the door, staring at the floor. He wasn't looking at the bomb. I'm going out, Bakugo said. What? Ida chopped the air furiously. Abandoning the objective? That is not villainous behavior. That is negligence. That nerd. Bakugo's hands smoked, the nitroglycerin sweating from his palms reacting to his agitation. He thinks he can look down on me. He thinks his atomizer makes him a big shot. I'm going to intercept him. But teamwork. He's a ranged fighter, Bakugo cut in, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He needs line of sight. He needs distance to calculate those fancy snipes of his. If I get in his face, if I close the gap, he can't shoot without blowing himself up. Bakugo looked back at Ida. Guard the bomb, 4 eyes. I'm going to remind Deku why he's always been behind me. He kicked the door open and stalked into the dark hallway. Outside, Izuku and Uraraka stood before the building blueprints. Okay, Izuku said, tapping the map. He was in his element now. The fear was there, but the analysis was stronger. Kaken is going to come for me. He won't care about the bomb. He won't care about the time limit. His win condition isn't the exercise, it's beating me. Uraraka nodded. So he's going to ambush us? Yes. He knows I rely on visual targeting. He'll try to engage in CQC, close quarters combat, immediately to negate my range advantage. If he gets close, I'm at a disadvantage. My explosions heat me up, and if I detonate too close to my own body, I risk burns even with the suit. Izuku looked at Uraraka. Uraraka-san, I need you to go alone. Eh? She blinked. But isn't that dangerous? It's the only way, Izuku explained rapidly. I'll draw his fire. I'll make a lot of noise. While he's focused on me, you use your zero gravity to float up the exterior or sneak through the ventilation shafts if possible. Find the bomb. Ida will be guarding it, but Ida is rigid. If you catch him off guard, you can touch the bomb. You're going to fight Bakugo alone? Uraraka asked, concern etched on her face. Izuku looked up at the building. He adjusted his gloves. I've been running away from him since we were 4 years old, Izuku said softly. I'm not running today. I need to know where I stand. Start. All Might's voice rang over the loudspeakers. Go! Izuku whispered. They entered through a first-floor window. As soon as they hit the corridor, they split up. Uraraka activated her quirk on herself, making her footsteps silent as a feather, and headed for the stairs. Izuku walked down the main hallway. He didn't sneak. He let his boots crunch on the debris. He walked into the center of the lobby, a large open space with pillars. I know you're there, Kaken, Izuku said. Movement. From a blind corner to his right. No hesitation, no warning. Daithai. Bakugo launched himself out of the shadows, propelled by a blast from behind. He was a blur of motion. His right gauntlet was pulled back, primed for a devastating swing. Izuku's eyes tracked the motion. Vector, right hook. Velocity high. Izuku didn't dodge. He raised his left hand, palm open, aiming not at Bakugo, but at the air between them. Atomizer, flash bang, crack. Izuku snapped his fingers. A sphere of compressed air detonated with a blinding flash of light and a deafening report right in Bakugo's path. It wasn't a damaging blast, but a sensory overload. Bakugo flinched, his swing going wide as he squeezed his eyes shut instinctively. Izuku used the opening. He pivoted, aiming his right boot at the floor. Propulsion. A burst of heat shot from his soul, launching Izuku backward, sliding him across the polished concrete floor like a hockey puck. He put 10 meters between them in a second. Nice try, Izuku said, raising both hands, fingers poised like pistols. Bakugo shook his head, growling like a wild animal. Smoke drifted from his gauntlets. He opened his eyes, red irises burning with fury. A flashbang? Bakugo scoffed. Cheap parlor tricks. Stop running and fight me. I am fighting, Izuku replied. I'm fighting smart. Bakugo roared and charged again. This time, he zigzagged. He used small explosions in his palms to change direction midair, bouncing off the pillars, closing the distance erratically. He's fast, Izuku thought, tracking the movements. Too fast to snipe without risking a miss. Bakugo closed the gap. He was inside Izuku's guard. Gotcha! Bakugo unleashed a right hook. Izuku ducked, feeling the heat of the explosion singe the top of his cowl. Izuku tried to bring his hand up for a point-blank blast, but Bakugo was already moving. He grabbed Izuku's outstretched arm, pivoted, and slammed his other hand into Izuku's ribs. Boom! The explosion threw Izuku sideways. He smashed into a concrete pillar, the air knocked out of him. The cooling gel in his suit sloshed violently. My explosions have mass! Bakugo shouted, looming over him. You just heat up the air. My sweat creates a physical impact wall. You can't beat me in a brawl, Deku! Izuku gasped, tasting copper. His ribs throbbed. Bakugo was right. Atomizer was pure energy release. It pushed, it burned, but it lacked the dense, physical slam of Bakugo's nitroglycerin unless Izuku used dangerous amounts of heat. Bakugo raised a gauntlet. It's over. Izuku looked up. His mask hissed as it vented excess heat. Not yet. Izuku didn't aim at Bakugo. He slammed both hands against the pillar behind him. Atomizer, tremor. He detonated the air inside the porous concrete. KRKOM. The pillar didn't explode outward. It shattered internally. The structural integrity failed instantly. The ceiling above them groaned, and a massive slab of concrete broke loose, falling directly between them. Bakugo jumped back to avoid being crushed. Dust filled the room. When the dust settled, Izuku was gone. Observation room. That was reckless! Kirishima shouted, gripping the monitor railing. He brought the ceiling down on himself. No, All Might murmured, leaning forward. Look closely. He calculated the shear point. He knew exactly where the debris would fall to create a barrier. He's retreating to the upper floors, Yaoyorozu noted. Midoriya knows he can't win a fistfight against Bakugo. He's turning this into a guerrilla war. But look at his temperature, Kaminari pointed to the biometric readout. He's already at 101 degrees. That close-range blast heated him up fast. Third floor corridor. Izuku leaned against the wall, panting. The cooling tubes in his suit were glowing brighter now, circulating the nitrogen solution frantically. The cold liquid against his hot skin felt like ice burns, but it kept his head clear. Uraraka-san, he tapped his earpiece. Status? I'm on the 5th floor. Her voice crackled breathless. I found the room. Ida, he's really getting into character. He's monologuing to the bomb. Izuku allowed a small smile. Okay. Wait for my signal. I need to deal with the heavy artillery first. Where are you, Deku? Bakugo's scream echoed up the stairwell. Izuku pushed himself off the wall. He's coming. He walked to the center of the long hallway. This was a better kill zone. Long line of sight. No pillars. Bakugo crested the stairs. He saw Izuku standing at the other end of the hall, 50 meters away. Finally, Bakugo sneered. Done running? I was just looking for a better firing range, Izuku said. Bakugo grinned. He raised his right arm. His gauntlet clicked. You know how these work, right, nerd? Bakugo asked, tapping the gauntlet. I asked the support course to build these. They store my sweat. Inside, it compresses and concentrates. Izuku's eyes widened behind his mask. Concentrated fluid ignition. That's not a grenade. That's a missile. If I pull this pin, Bakugo said, his finger hooking onto the metal ring, it creates a blast that doesn't just hurt. It obliterates. Young Bakugo. All Might's voice cut into their earpieces. Stop. Are you trying to kill him? In a closed environment, a blast of that magnitude will cause lethal shockwaves. He won't die if he dodges. Bakugo yelled back. He pulled the pin. Click. Time seemed to slow. Izuku saw the ignition spark deep inside the gauntlet. He saw the rush of fluid. I can't dodge that. The hallway confines the blast. The pressure wave alone will rupture my organs. Izuku didn't run. He planted his feet. If I can't dodge it, I have to defuse it. Equation 7, Izuku muttered. Counter pressure. He raised both hands, palms facing forward, fingers spread wide. He reached deep into his core, pulling every ounce of thermal energy he had. His suit's warning alarm shrieked in his ear. Temperature, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Critical. Bakugo fired. A colossal torrent of fire and force erupted from the gauntlet. It filled the hallway, a roaring dragon of destruction eating up the distance between them. Izuku screamed. Atomizer, rejection. He didn't fire a beam. He fired a wall. He excited every molecule of air in a 10-meter radius in front of him, creating a massive, high-pressure zone, a solid block of superdense air. The explosion slammed into Izuku's air wall. Boom! The sound was apocalyptic. The building shook to its foundation. Windows on the 3rd floor blew out, showering the street below in glass. The two forces collided, Bakugo's directional blast versus Izuku's stationary pressure shield. For a second they held. Then, physics took over. The collision point erupted outward. The floor between them disintegrated. The walls were scoured clean of paint. Smoke billowed, thick and black. Midoriya! Bakugo! All Might shouted. Silence. Then a cough. The smoke cleared slowly. The hallway was a ruin. A massive crater separated the two boys. Bakugo stood near the stairs, his arms smoking, his eyes wide with shock. He had fired his strongest shot, and Izuku was still standing. Izuku was on one knee. His suit was scorched. His mask had cracked, revealing one green eye. The glowing tubes on his suit were hissing, venting steam. He was trembling violently. You! Bakugo whispered. You blocked it? I neutralized the vector, Izuku rasped. He stood up, his legs shaking. His skin was glowing a terrifying, bright cherry red. He was cooking alive. You rely on brute force, Kaken. Force can be redirected. Bakugo stared at him. For the first time, genuine fear flickered in his eyes. Not fear of being hurt, but fear of being surpassed. Izuku had taken his best shot, and was still standing. You think you're better than me? Bakugo screamed, his voice cracking. He abandoned tactics. He abandoned the bomb. He charged. Don't look down on me. He launched himself over the crater using a blast, flying straight at Izuku. Izuku watched him come. Internal temp, 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Vision blurring. One shot left. maybe 2. He couldn't win a fist fight. He was too weak now. If Bakugo touched him, it was over, but Izuku didn't need to knock Bakugo out. He just needed to win. Think. Bakugo was in the air, winding up a punch infused with explosions. I'm going to bury you. Izuku looked at Bakugo. Then, he looked up. The ceiling. Wait. Not the ceiling, the floor. They were on the 3rd floor. The weapon was on the 5th. Uraraka was on the 5th, but directly above the 5th floor was the roof. And directly below the 5th floor, Uraraka! Izuku yelled into the comms. Grab a pillar. Hold on tight. What? Izuku didn't aim at Bakugo. As Bakugo swung, Izuku dropped flat onto his back. Bakugo's fist sailed over him, missing by an inch. Izuku pointed both hands straight up at the ceiling above them, the floor of the 4th story. Atomizer, bunker buster. He focused the blast into a needle-thin line of superheated plasma. A drill. Zoom. The beam shot upward. It punched through the ceiling of the 3rd floor. It continued up, punching through the floor of the 4th. It punched through the ceiling of the 4th, the floor of the 5th. 5th floor. Ida was laughing maniacally. You cannot defeat me, hero. I have secured the weapon. Uraraka was hiding behind a desk. Deku said to hold on. Suddenly, the floor beneath Ida's feet glowed white. What in the name of KRKOM? A precision hole, 2 meters wide, vaporized beneath Ida. Gravity did the rest. Villainy has failed me. Ida screamed as he plummeted through the floor, falling straight down the hole Izuku had drilled through 2 stories. The bomb, however, was on a stand. It didn't fall, but the floor around it was crumbling. Now! Uraraka yelled. She leaped from behind the desk. She slapped herself, making herself weightless, and dove for the weapon. Ida was gone. The room was shaking. She hugged the papier-mâché bomb. Captured! She squeaked. 3rd floor. Bakugo landed after his missed punch. He spun around to finish Izuku. DKU! He grabbed Izuku by the collar, lifting him up. Izuku was limp, his eyes half closed, steam pouring off his body like a boiling kettle. Why? Bakugo hissed, shaking him. Why didn't you shoot me? You had a clear shot. Why did you shoot the ceiling? Hero team wins. All Might's voice boomed. Bakugo froze. He looked up. Through the hole Izuku had blasted, he could see straight up to the 5th floor. He saw Uraraka hugging the bomb. He looked down. He saw the hole continuing downward, where Ida had presumably crashed into a pile of rubble on the 2nd floor. Bakugo's grip on Izuku's collar loosened. Izuku managed a weak, delirious smile. His face was burned from the heat of his own quirk, his hair matted with sweat. Because, Izuku whispered, his voice barely audible. Being a hero isn't about beating you, Kaken. It's about the mission. Izuku's eyes rolled back. He slumped forward, unconscious, falling against Bakugo's chest. Bakugo stood there in the ruined hallway. The dust swirled around them. He was unhurt. He was still standing. He was the strongest one in the room, and he had lost completely. The aftermath. The infirmary was quiet. Recovery Girl had kissed Izuku's forehead and scolded him for 20 minutes about cooking his insides like a pot roast, but his temperature had stabilized. He was sleeping now, hooked up to 4 fluids. Back in the monitor room, the class was silent. All Might stood at the front. Well, that was intense. Now, who can tell me who the MVP of this battle was? I can, Sir, Yaoyorozu said, raising her hand. Go ahead. It was Ida, she said. Eh? The class blinked. Ida was the only one who adapted to the scenario properly, Yaoyorozu explained, adjusting her ponytail. He fortified the room and remained focused on the objective. Bakugo abandoned the objective entirely to pursue a personal grudge. That is a failing grade for a hero or a villain. She turned to the screen showing the unconscious Izuku. And Midoriya. While his plan was brilliant, it was reckless. He destroyed the structural integrity of a multi-story building. If that had been real, the collapse could have killed the hostage, or the villains. He sacrificed his own body to a dangerous degree. It was a Pyrrhic victory, a fair assessment. All Might said, sweating slightly. Internally, he thought, she's strict. But she's right. Izuku is still too self-sacrificial. Bakugo stood in the corner of the room. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't arguing. He was staring at his hands. He ignored me, Bakugo thought. The realization was a cold knife in his gut. In the end, he didn't even care about fighting me. He used me as a distraction. He used the environment. He used everything, except his fists. He looked up at the screen where Ito was being pulled out of the rubble, looking dizzy but unharmed. My explosions have impact, Bakugo thought, replaying the fight. But his explosions have purpose. Sunset.